Today's special episode of Socially Democratic is presented to you by Dunn Street. Dunn Street partners with businesses, organisations, unions and social democratic parties across Australia and the globe to train leaders, develop engagement strategies and empower people to organise for change. Even though 2020 has presented us with a couple of challenges, Dunn Street will continue to work with folks that want to make a difference, inspire, give hope and enable leadership to achieve their shared purpose. To find out ways in which you can partner with Dunn Street, hit us up at dunnstreet.com.au. Hello and welcome to another episode of Socially Democratic, your weekly centre-left political and cultural podcast that dives into the progressive issues of the day and the people leading them from home and abroad. And on this week's special episode, I wanted to talk about Black Lives Matters and how it means to our first Australians. But instead of me doing that and interviewing someone as I normally do, it was suggested to me by someone far smarter than I am that I should hand over the socially democratic microphones to two Koori people to talk about Aboriginal affairs, which is a great idea. So that's what we're doing today. On today's episode, we're going to be hearing from two inspiring Aboriginal Victorian leaders, Uncle Mookeye and Laura Thompson. Uncle Mookeye is a Gunditjmara man who has lived most of his life on country and brings 30 years of working in Aboriginal affairs, including working for the Victorian Aboriginal Legal Service. He was a convener of the Wurrungungun Criminal Records Discrimination Project and the CEO of the Windamara Aboriginal Cooperation, and was recently elected to the First Peoples Assembly here in Victoria in October last year for his region down in the southwest. And joining Uncle Mookeye is Laura Thompson. Laura is a Gunditjmara woman who grew up in Collingwood and is an artist living and working here in Naarm and runs three businesses: Spark Health, which is dedicated to adding years to Aboriginal people's lives, and the Koori Circle, which creates contemporary Aboriginal designed and inspired jewellery. She also, while she's not doing those two things, runs Clothing the Gap, not Closing the Gap, but Clothing, CLOTHING, Clothing the Gap, an Aboriginal-owned and led social enterprise dedicated to uniting Aboriginal and non-Aboriginal people through fashion and causes. And she'll talk a little bit about that because there's actually some amazing things that is going on in that space, which I think is actually kind of outrageous. But I'll let Laura and Uncle Mookeye talk more about that and a whole bunch of other things that are impacting Aboriginal Victorians and Indigenous Australians across our huge continent. And they will mention a whole bunch of things in which ways in which non-Indigenous allies can stand with our First Nations peoples. And there'll be a whole bunch of links that they'll talk about. I'll post those links in the bio for the podcast, for today's podcast, as well as on all of our social media, Dunn Street social media platforms. So check them out and find out ways in which you can support some of these great campaigns. Don't forget to subscribe to the podcast on Apple Podcasts, Spotify and Stitcher. And if you're on Apple Podcasts, please leave us a rating and a review. And for all the updates about Socially Democratic, just follow us at the Dunn Street socials on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram and LinkedIn. So let's get to today's episode.
Hi. I'm Michael Bell, Uncle Mookeye from Gunditjmara country in southwest Victoria, and here on the Social Democratic podcast, having a conversation with the lady from Melbourne there and country woman, Laura Thompson. So, hello, Laura.
Hi, Uncle Mookeye. Lovely to chat. I'm also a Gunditjmara woman and who's sort of born and raised on Wurundjeri country in Melbourne.
Yeah, and us mobs stay together, don't we?
Yeah,
pretty thick out there in the world, the Gunditjmara mob. So we're as we say, we're too deadly. Just a bit of history, a little bit around Gunditjmara. It's obviously out in southwest Victoria, out near Portland, Hamilton, Warrnambool, Port Fairy country. We've got Budge Bim, they used to be known as Mount Eccles out that way, which created a significant lava flow that created a lot of our culture and history with our stone houses, stone fish traps, the aquaculture system. And just recently I think it was August last year, 2019, parts of that country known as Budge Bim landscape, cultural heritage landscape, was inscribed by the UNESCO as a World Heritage Site. So based on the values that Gunditjmara people have continually lived on that country, and that country has provided for the Gunditjmara people for thousands of years. So, so it's quite a significant place. If people out there, look it up, Budge Bim is its time, BUDJBIM, and you'll get a lot of contacts or links about the country out there. So quite significant. I've grown up in Hayward, which is down here on country, born and bred, and got to move to the Shepparton in the early 80s and got to do an apprenticeship in carpentry and hook up with the Yorta mob around that part of the world. And so that was a great experience. And then moved back home with my family, my wife, Sandra, who's a Yorta lady, and we've got two sons, Billy and Miko, and a little grandson, Archie, and Billy's partner, Lisa, who has two boys. So house is pretty full in our part of the world. My family's got 9 in it. Laura, how many in your family?
I've got 3 big sisters, so I'm the baby, believe it or not. And then just too many cousins and nieces and nephews to count now.
I mean, we're just having a conversation. Really appreciate the opportunity from the podcast, Stephen, there to provide us the opportunity to have a conversation around Black Lives Matter, which is really, really important to us all. We've, both of us, I should say, heavily connected to our community groups. And I suppose, Laura, a few conversations around, I suppose just growing up in Melbourne and how it's, with those historic Aboriginal community control organisations that actually led the way for many of us out here in regional Victoria.
Yeah. So I started working in Aboriginal community-controlled organisations, probably spent about 25 years working in the spaces. I'm a public health practitioner. I love health promotion. It's my thing. But sort of since found myself moving out of Aboriginal co-ops, and now I own some businesses. So I'm founding and managing director of Clothing the Gap and Spark Health, and we're just about to launch a new not-for-profit called Walla, and strangely enough, it feels so ridiculous talking about all these enterprises that I'm managing now, but another little earring business called the Koori Circle. So certainly it's exciting times, I think, for community sort of moving in and through and around co-ops, but then strangely, like myself, finding myself in a world of Aboriginal business, which has been really cool.
Great point. I mean, I'm 56 now, Laura, and I know you're not that much younger than me, but you've got a few years there. The Aboriginal community control sector, as we know it, from the old, not that long ago, Aboriginal membership, vote for Aboriginal leaders in their organisation, and the Aboriginal Advancement League down in Melbourne, VACA, the Aboriginal Children's Services, and significant, and VACCHO, the Victorian Aboriginal Community Controlled Health Organisation, is quite significant in what they do. And then I've just done 10 years as a CEO of the Windamara Aboriginal Corporation in Hayward. And it's definitely where the old school of community control. And now we're seeing, I know being someone who's been involved in it for a good 30 odd years, that we want our younger generations to take hold and be innovative and create opportunities for themselves and their community. And this is what you're getting into, mate. And it's really, really good to see, because I think that is, we talk about self-determination, and you guys being quite brave and stepping into that world is quite unique, and pretty impressive to watch from the side at the moment.
Thank you. And I guess just touching on my auntie Elma Thorpe, who was I guess like one of the linchpins in helping set up these organisations. Look, I touched base with her when I just started the businesses and told her about it, and she said, "Laura, I don't care what you do. I just want to know, what's your philosophy?" And I think for anyone who's in whatever spaces or entities or organisations you find yourself in, being true to what the cause is, and ours is certainly to add years to people's lives. And with the clothing brand, Clothing the Gap, that we're running, I remind myself daily almost what the purpose of that brand is, and that is to unite people through fashion and a cause. And often you can get led off the road, but reminding ourselves that this cause part of what we talk, that we stand for, it's, yes, we're selling clothes, but we're using it as a platform for activism. So reminding ourselves, if we're thinking about, is this a cute top, or does this top stand for something? And remembering that we are, a brand that stands up for a cause, and we're unique in that way. And I think that's exciting, because not only are we selling clothes and seeing more Aboriginal design in the world, we're changing the way people think about issues. And it's just a massive education platform that I never realised it could be, really.
The work of art and culture, it's been our strength for thousands of generations, and to use that to connect with people, and people look for that to connect and be a part of a process, not a process, an identity, that raises identity, is quite significant. And I think what you're doing is quite, it's thousands of generations old, but in the contemporary world that we live in, Laura, it's quite, I think that's the thing that a lot of our mob, we will have elders who go, I don't know whether we can go that way, or whether we can or can't, but for the new generation of Aboriginal businesses, I just reckon it's unreal what they're doing, and all the best with that for the future. So there's a great story in it. So just moving on to, we've had a great weekend last weekend. A lot of people were out and about around Black Lives Matter. I was at home. I had to do some work with my mum on my mum's bedroom, so I couldn't get out. We had a lot of family around, which was really important. But just seeing a lot of people out there, a lot of the mob leading the protest, raising the issue around Black Lives Matter. I've been I'm a former chairperson of the Aboriginal Legal Service in Victoria. I was a part of the Aboriginal Justice Agreement, which was a partnership between the Aboriginal community and the state government, and which is really trying to address the overrepresentation of Aboriginal people in jail. That agreement has gone from Agreement 1, Aboriginal Agreement 1, to Aboriginal Agreement 4 that we're sitting in today. Still have significant overrepresentation in the criminal justice system. Been a part of the Aboriginal Children's Forum, which was another partnership between the state government and Aboriginal community groups around Aboriginal kids in care, and we've seen that still substantially grow in numbers. The number of kids in out-of-home care, I think nearly 20% of our kids are connected to the out-of-home care system. So it's quite significant, a lot of work to do. But I think there's a lot of good foundations out there around partnerships and a way forward. But once again, self-determination is putting the Aboriginal people in a decision-making process, in a capacity-building process to ensure we change those horrible statistics out there.
I think you're so right, Uncle Mookeye. Just thinking about the march, I didn't go either, and I felt a whole lot of guilt around that. But I was just really exhausted from the week. And you think about the toll that it takes on you when you're on your phone and that's all you see. And certainly in our work when we're educating people all the time, and at Clothing the Gap, we had so many non-Indigenous people just reaching out, wanting to know more, having to educate, and then having to get their march outfit sorted. By the time the march come around, I thought, I just can't deal with it. And then I put my hand up to be a babysitter and babysat my gorgeous nieces and nephews. So, the rest of my family could go and be part of that experience. And certainly, like, I felt the load during the whole week and the march. We have, I guess, we've been marching for things for a really long time, and I think whatever that is, and if you don't mind, Uncle Mookeye, if I just share a little bit of a poem that my sister wrote about what we march for.
Thank you.
Yeah. So it's just a couple of lines. It's not the complete poem, but I guess it just helps us put into perspective that Aboriginal people from birth have been standing and fighting for things, and Black Lives Matter and deaths in custody and police brutality is one of those issues, but there's so many of them, unfortunately. So my sister's Joanne Dewey, by the way. So we march in honour of our ancestors whose blood has fertilised this land. Their stories of struggle and sacrifice we carry protectively within our hands. We march for those too old to walk but who have given their lives to community. We carry their spirit and acknowledge their strength. They are the reason we understand unity. We march for the silent achievers who have never received awards. We may not know them by name, but our feet honour them in applause. We march for those who died in custody, the lack of justice and the pain. We won't forget your family suffering. We will always remember your names. And it's lovely. Yeah. And she goes on, and this is a thing. There's about another 10 lines that talk about why we march, and then we wonder why, as Aboriginal people, we're so exhausted because the cultural loads and the burdens and the injustice and the inequity in this country, we're still living with it every day.
I think, the conversation just before it, and thanks, Joe, for that great poem there, really describes what has impacts. Just your conversation just before it, Laura, that you had to look after family for others to do stuff. And, many of the aunties, your mum and my mum and others before them, really done a lot of kept family groups together. A lot of families did get taken. A lot of young people did get taken, but the work that many of these elders and their elders before them had done to make it to keep people safe and connected to culture is quite significant. And you're seeing the great work that the next generations are bringing online is quite amazing. So, I just want to acknowledge that. I know that many of these, mainly women, Aboriginal women, and a lot of Aboriginal men elders don't have that resource of what do we call it, superannuation, to fit into retirement or to lead to just do what you want to do when you get superannuation and have some type of income after you retire. Well, I just know many of the elders over 70 would not have that access and would be still very vulnerable, but very strong in their culture and their identity, and still caring for a lot of family in that scenario. So, big shout out to the works of the elders from the past, how they kept our communities together, how they kept. We had 9 in our family, but Mum also made sure other family members, other first cousins, and that had a bed to stay in when coming to town. So sometimes we'd have 14 in the house, the old 3-bedroom. So it was, and we're not the one out. There's all the families across Victoria were very much the same, and so that wealth issue is still a big concern about our mob living in the current environment, and change has got to come, and acknowledgements and reimbursements need to happen. I sit on the First Peoples Assembly. Got elected in the First Peoples Assembly elections last year, about October, I think it was, and we had our first assembly meeting in December. And we sat in Parliament. I didn't mind it, but others couldn't sit because of the environment where legislation was made against Aboriginal people. But we did have an elder sit there, Auntie Eunice Wright, who's well known, and got to acknowledge that aunt has passed away recently. But Aunt was I'm talking about her because of the advocacy she done around stolen generations was quite significant. And the Premier, Dan Andrews, was in the presented to the Assembly, and Aunt was there. And the conversation about redress for our stolen generation community members was put on the table. And I think in about February, we've seen an announcement around a redress program from the state for Aboriginal stolen generation. So Aunt was very much at the front of that with all other stolen generation members. And for generations to come, there's still a lot of work to support them. But just want to acknowledge Auntie Eunice right there with that conversation. Yeah.
Yeah. Uncle Mookeye, can you just explain to everyone who might not know what the stolen generation is?
Oh, for sure. Aboriginal kids, were picked up by police. Our welfare issues was obviously the concern, and the lack of understanding on how Aboriginal people lived was a significant issue because it wasn't like everybody, the mainstream Australia lived, and they decided that that there was inappropriate housing, not so much about the families, but the housing and things like that impacted on, or made people consider that these kids need to be removed from their homes. And I'm a part of a project, Laura recalled the Warren Duggan Criminal Records Discrimination Project, and it looks at a part of it where we had 13 case studies in there, and a couple of case studies where one in particular, Uncle Larry Walsh, was his study, and it identified that he had a conviction at the age of 2.
Wow.
So when he got taken from his parents, or up in Mooroopna there, it was recorded as a conviction. And Uncle Larry's story's out there in the Koori Mail and major newspapers about a couple of years ago when we first put out the submission, and he mentions that as a 7-year-old in foster care, a policeman said, "Oh, you're a naughty boy." He goes, "No, I'm not. I haven't been in trouble." He said, "And by then I hadn't. I did get into trouble when I was 13 and stuff." And but I've always wondered what was why would they talk to me like that? And it was because they understood of him having a conviction. So it was it's something that impacted on a lot of mainly Aboriginal people. I don't know about non-Aboriginal people, but Aboriginal people, kids had a recording of a conviction as a young person. Our submission is around getting a spent conviction legislation in Victoria. Victoria is the only state in Australia that does not have spent conviction. The Attorney General for Victoria has done a media release in February stating that the Victorian government is considering spent conviction legislation in this term. So hopefully it gets a Guernsey through Parliament. But once again, Aboriginal people are not in Parliament, Laura, as we know. They're not part of the lawmaking processes of this state today. That's something I lobby for as a member of the Treaty Assembly. I really think a lot of the issues that arise to us is because we don't have anybody in the Parliament. We did have with Lydia Thorpe, and well done to Lydia and the party that got her into Parliament. And I see that she's running for the Senate in the federal government. So all the best. But I still believe there should be an Aboriginal direct seat that we can put members into Parliament. Yeah. So yeah. What about you, stolen generations, Laura? You would have, your services, building capacity of young people. We know that I think there's been a report from the Aboriginal Commissioner for Children and Young People a few years ago, noting that only 10% of their legislative requirements were being implemented while in care. A significant part was cultural plans for the child, and only about 10% of those plans are being completed. I think there's a lot of work going in that today, but we need entrepreneurs to help deliver those programs.
Well, it's so important. I mean, we're involved in the facilitating and organising the Junior Fitzroy Stars Football Club. And we have quite a high number of kids that are in care that play for that team, and it's not their local football club by any means, but they travel there just to wear the red, black and yellow jerseys to run on to the Fitzroy or the Sir Douglas Nicholls Oval that's got history for them and their families. And sometimes those cultural plans can be as simple as what are the ways that we can get kids to connect back to community, and I think about this, what does contemporary Aboriginal culture and community look like these days? And some of that looks like, I think, playing alongside, your cousins and your family in an mostly Aboriginal football team. So, that's, I guess, thinking about what culture looks like these days in this contemporary sense is something I think about in enterprise. And I certainly think sport plays a significant part in our cultural engagements. I don't know about you, Uncle Mookeye, but I kind of think about the statewide sporting carnivals as being a corroboree.
Oh, for sure. They're quite significant, haven't they? It was unreal got to watch them as a young fellow and then got to participate. Was absolutely great. I got to play in one when I was 48, Laura, and I got to play with my two sons, and it was a great environment. And to see how many teams come out of that participate today, you'd remember from the 70s and the 80s that there was only 2 or 3 teams playing, and I think at a carnival today between netball and football there'd be something like 60-odd teams that rock up, and you're finding that many are family connected teams, and it's you're right on. It's a corroboree, and it's something that's going to be continued.
I was like, God forbid my kids will know how to throw and catch, because if you don't, how will you participate in community? I was so worried. I'm thinking, oh God bless. And even myself, I wasn't that athletic, but I just stuck at it because that I definitely wanted to be part of the carnivals. And even when you see today at the carnivals how I'm talking about fashion again, but the way the uniforms of the teams are evolved to represent their totems back home, and how that's a way that they get to celebrate artwork, symbols and culture through their uniforms. So cool to see.
But see it evolve into the AFL and all the national sporting clubs, and the cricket, the Australian cricket team. I think a lot of that came from the sporting carnivals from across Australia. Rugby, rugby league, and AFL, and that. Yeah, it's quite pretty good.
Yeah, I'm finding that, and there's something really powerful about seeing Aboriginal clothes and design in the world, and just that increased visibility. And when Aboriginal people see design, they're not invisible in spaces anymore. It's cool.
I suppose around enterprise, Laura, what are some of the challenges that are probably coming on to Aboriginal entrepreneurs in especially around the flag situation and things like that. What are some of the barriers out there?
I think the first challenge for Aboriginal people going into business, often it's a new space. For me, I don't know anyone that owns a business, so you just don't have that kind of lived experience of just stuff you take for granted that you just learn along the way. All of us know how co-ops works, but not co-ops works, or Aboriginal medical services. We've grown up in those spaces, but we don't know many people. I don't know anyone that had a business, so everything was new. Startups cost money, so there was a period of time, at least 6 months, where I just was lucky I had enough money to support myself in the business, because certainly there was a period of time that I wasn't getting paid, and I still don't get paid what I was getting before, but the rewards are so much more than the pay, and I know that will come. So I guess the financial stability is a challenge to start with, knowing people in the industry. But then I think the opportunities certainly are phenomenal. With the Black Lives Matter in the business, we found that people have just wanted to support Aboriginal business, and even the other people who have started businesses, they've texted me sis, I'm going to need to employ someone. I've sold 250 prints in the last day. I'm like, far out. Thanks, Australia. Thanks, non-Indigenous people. You've just given so many businesses I know the kickstart they need to stay in this space and to employ other Aboriginal people and to create wealth independent of any government fundings or handouts, which is incredible, the opportunity for wealth creation. And for us, I guess, to set our own agenda, we're leading at Closing the Gap the Free the Flag campaign, and I'm grateful that I'm in business every day because I can use my voice in the business without having to check in with anyone that I can. I don't need permission. I don't have to go to a board, a CEO to say, yep, Laura, you can talk on this. I'm like, my business, I'm founder, and I'm pissed off about this Aboriginal flag copyright, and I'm going to scream it from the rooftops to anyone who will listen to me, and I'm going to start a campaign. And guess what? No one can stop me because I'm independent of any government funding. I'm not linked to any of it. And I look at all the other organisations, and there's so many that haven't spoken up about it, and it includes like the big AFL, the big sporting clubs, and even some organisations because they're worried about what will happen to their bottom line, to any additional money they might get if they speak out on issues because it might impact on them financially. But certainly I found the opposite to be true in Closing the Gap, is that people really appreciate the people who stand up for what they believe in. And the community's really backed us with the Free the Flag campaign. We've got over 75,000 people sign our petition, hundreds writing to their local MPs, and lots of people, most importantly, having these conversations in their own communities about what can we do to help the cause. So it's cool.
Oh, you're right on, Laura. Like the flag's been a part of our lives, since the 70s, and it's but the movement, the people who've lived and died for that flag is quite significant, and it represents Aboriginal Australia. I think the governments, across both federal and state, really aware of that. Really good to hear you talk about the big sporting bodies like the AFL and that. They acknowledge it, but there's something that we need people to protect it and to ensure that it belongs to the people of Australia, the Aboriginal flag, because not just Aboriginal people appreciate the flag. I think a lot of non-Aboriginal people in this country appreciate the flag. So I think hearing your call is that, it needs to be sorted and owned by the people. And I'm 110% behind you, mate, because great work in doing the leadership around it. And it's quite interesting to hear, that, as an independent business, that you're fighting hard for it. A lot of energy. That's that exhausting stuff you've spoken about, because it's something that belongs to everybody, and we really need to get behind it and ensure. 75,000 signatures is a great effort, but I think the flag belongs to everybody, and mainly the Australian government needs to make sure that comes into play, because it's a strong identity. You spoke about the kids wanting to play to go to the junior footy for the Fitzroy Stars down there in Melbourne, and be identified. And when we go to the carnival, they're quite significant. And they're little drawings they do at kinder and things like that. The kinder directors actually say, they're connecting you to those colours, because, it just builds that character and being proud of who you are. So it's really, really important. Great work. So what else is on the table, Laura?
What else? I'm just thinking, who am I going to fight next? Which cause am I going to get behind? I know that sounds like a joke, but certainly that's how I feel. Like we're, we sort of exposed Buddy Franklin just recently for his alignment to WAM Clothing, who hold the exclusive worldwide copyright on the Aboriginal flag, and we spoke openly and publicly and respectfully about that. Again, surprised about how many people who won't speak up against people like Buddy Franklin with high profiles and lots of followers. And I just think, like, in society, if we're not prepared to call out people with positional power, then we've got a problem. And, even some young girls in the office today said, look, I don't know what that's going to mean for my career if I speak out. I'm like, oh, my God, what is wrong with this world? We need people to talk up for stuff. We need people to speak up for justice. And certainly we've seen that play out in the Black Lives Matters marches. There are more of it. So what next for us? I don't know. Look, I won't stop till the flag's free, or well, at least until the flag's birthday, which it turns 50 in July next year. And I really think that I have to draw a line in the sand at that time. Whether or not we give up on trying to free it, or we just decide we're going to adopt a new symbol as a national flag, I think it will be clearer then about what we do. Yeah.
Well done on that conversation, Laura. I think it's great. I'm working on a rethink criminal records project with the RMIT, the Centre for Innovative Justice. There, we're looking about how people can, or mainly Aboriginal people with previous convictions, can gain employment. Using strong addressing the process about registering, for working with children. A lot of people, when they get asked a question, once again, that exhausting thing, they're going, oh, something happened to me 10 years ago and I can't get a working with children. I'm going to put this in the bin and ignore it and not move ahead with my life. So we're continuing on with that. Hopefully we get the legislation around spent conviction, this year sometime is going to be quite significant. But just in finishing, Laura, I think it's just been great to talk to you. I mean, we've known each other. It's great to have a chat. Really appreciate Stephen Donnelly and the Social Democratic podcast for providing us the opportunity. Stephen mentioned that he was asking about how he can, what type of program he can do around Aboriginal people, and I think his partner said to him, well, just get a couple of queries on the system and let them run be a part of your show and let them see how they go. So it's a real bit of an experiment, and just like to thank Stephen and his podcast, Social Democratic, for allowing us to have this. So, Laura?
Yeah, cool. I'm just thinking before we wrap up, Uncle Mookeye, just for the people listening, what are some things you think that they can do to show their support and be a deadly ally for us Aboriginal mob?
I think understanding what are the social things that impact on us. We've known that Aboriginal overrepresentation in the criminal justice system has been around forever. There's obviously a need for a change in the way that happens, and how do we build capacity of family groups. I think there's an interconnection with the criminal justice, out-of-home care and moving into the criminal justice system. I think it's quite significant. Some of the little things that happen there, Laura, like if you're in care and you may damage something, and you might get a conviction from that, and yet if it's your own child, you may break the door or the plaster. You're going to get told by your mum and dad. Whereas if you're in a care in a residential facility, you're going to get charged with an offence as being a young person who is obviously dealing with mental health, trauma, cultural identity, and things like that. And you get a tag against your name. So there's some of the things that we've got to look at in the future, and we need people to get on board and conversate about that. How to get capacity into young people. 20% of our young kids, 0 to 18, are connected to the out-of-home care system. So that's quite significant. We need support to change that, but that support is how do we empower and ensure self-determination is at the front of it. So, get on, hear about that. ACOs, Aboriginal Community Controlled Health Organisations, the Budgebin World Heritage Landscape, come down and visit it.
You're right.
There's some great stories there.
It's like
the Koori Heritage Trust in Melbourne and Aboriginal businesses. I think, there's some good head agencies across Victoria that lead that up with us. So, continue to support us. I think you're so right. I think people finding
we spoke about this earlier about like educating yourself. There's so many great resources and books out there. So, you know, I don't know about you, Uncle Mookeye, but you don't look like a black Google search engine to me. So people can just like sort of drain our lives, just Google a little bit. And then if they can't find the answer, then by all means ask an Aboriginal person. But I think doing that research first is important. And something you've mentioned, Uncle Mookeye, that I really thought about since the last time we yarned was about using Aboriginal language and words in conversations. I think that's cool, and I think that's something people can do respectfully. And I guess the other thing is immersing yourself in events, culture, like and business. So going to NAIDOC, different activities that you can go into Aboriginal theatre, eating Aboriginal foods. All those things are cool, great ways to get involved in community. And most recently with the Black Lives Matter, and I've found an increase in people trying to help out. And the most useful people who I've found who've reached out and said, oh, I want to help. And what they actually offer is a skill that they're good at. So a Facebook person rang me and said, I can help you with Facebook advertising. That's cool. She's not trying to do something else that's not relevant to her profession. I've got a pro bono lawyer that's helping me with the Free the Flag copyright case.
Wow.
So you don't need to, all you need to do is offer your skill set in what you're good at to Aboriginal people and allow them to access it. And the other thing I think is to always make sure that you're standing alongside Aboriginal people and not in front when we're sort of having any conversation. Yeah.
Right on, Laura. And, you know, having that understanding Australia has a black history, you know, and
yes.
the Gunditj Mara story, like many others across Australia, is significant. You know, in the 1840s, we had the Tara. He's known as Jupiter, you know, in a term that they used. He was a part of a 17-year-old resistance, a war within Australia. You know, it was the Gunditj Mara versus the squatters, settlers around the area, and you know, that story. We've got to, you know, you've got to bring out the history of Australia, not just from 200 years ago. The 200 years, but also the connection to country that Aboriginal people have had. And you're starting to hear some unreal stories. You know, exciting discoveries even today around Aboriginal culture, like over in Wanneroo, Milljoy site. They're talking about a 120,000-year-old site in Australia, you know, and down at the head of the Hopkins River there, you know, it's quite significant. They've definitely hit it at 80,000 years, you know, so it's all happening around there. So, yeah, we've got to acknowledge what's going on in Australia and where it's been, yeah, for sure.
I guess as maybe, you know, the last action piece. Look, I would love listeners to check out the Clothing the Gap website and our Free the Flag campaign. And there's 6 ways that you can show your support there. And one of them to sign a petition, write to your MP, have these conversations, buy some merch, donate some money if you can. We've just started actually a Free the Flag fighting campaign. We've been leading this campaign for over a year now, unfunded, and these additional resources, I guess, will allow us to keep campaigning. What about for you, Uncle Mookeye? If you could finish and you could tell the listeners one thing that you'd want them to check out, what would it be?
Oh, to check out. I mean, I've just been yarning. You know, the Bud's been World Heritage Landscapes quite significant.
I think that's it. That's so cool.
Yeah, it is. It's a great story, and you know, and what's come of it. The Lake Condamnation story is another one, like many others around. Don't just, you know, reach out to regional Victoria and see what's out there, because it belongs to everybody. You know, we had the conversation, the Lake Condamnation starting up in the 1860s to protect the Aboriginal people. And then we had World War I and World War II, where a lot of soldiers from the Lake Condamation fought for Australia. And when they come home to seek soldier settlement, they were denied because they were Aboriginal people. And, you know, there was the opportunity to create opportunity for our people who stood up and served for Australia. There's great stories, and dive in and get yourself wet in there and create some knowledge and awareness. Yeah, it's really important. Well, Laura, we can't talk all night.
I know.
I reckon I'm going to sign off now. Give a bit of a praise there before to the producer, or the owner of the site, and so bye from me, and
Thanks.
hope to talk again soon, Laura.
Yeah, thanks, Uncle Mookeye.
Thank you. All the best. Bye.
You too.